All right, welcome to Semper Sometimes with Benny, and today I have the whole crew, pretty much from Irreverent Warriors. One actually in the house. Thanks for driving out. I really appreciate that, Mark.
Pleasure.
And then I have Dan, and then I have Ryan with us from the nonprofit Irreverent Warriors. So first of all, I just want to say thank you to all three of you for making the time and taking the time to do this with me. And Dan for reaching out and making it happen. It just means the world to me because without nonprofits like yourself, I don't have a podcast. Besides running my suck about random crap, this is the reason why I started it. So just thank you guys so much for coming out, and I really appreciate it. So really what I wanted to start out with was just everybody having an understanding of who Irreverent Warriors is and also what you guys do to be a part of it. So I guess we can just round robin from the jump, just understanding what each part of what role is for each of you, and then we'll just go from there to understand as well.
Okay. So my name is Mark Herzog. I'm one of 9 national coordinators, actually. We're not the whole crew. We're a third of the crew.
Oh,
wow. So the mission of Irreverent Warriors is to bring veterans together using humor and camaraderie to improve mental health and prevent veteran suicide. And it started in 2015 with someone named Donnie O'Malley, who was losing brothers from his unit left and right to suicide, and said, I need to do something about this. So he was living out in California at the time, and he said, you know what, I'm going to try and get as many buddies together as I can, and we're just going to hike the beach and drink and wear silkies and combat boots, and it'll be funny. And, he just wanted to try and, use humor to keep his buddies alive. And word of this kind of caught like wildfire. And before we knew it, we had, hikes springing up throughout the country. Hey, this is a great idea. Let's do this. And it was a great thing. It kind of went a little bit like the Wild West for a couple of years until about 2017, 2018, when we said, you know what, we have a legitimate movement going on. We need to, really organize and help this grow because we're creating support networks. And so, we expanded, in our first leadership conference, 4 years ago, we had 35 leaders in the same room. In this past year, we had close to 120, Dan, Ryan?
Yeah, it was more like 130. Almost
130? Yeah. So we are growing at an exponential, pace. And our primary mission is not to bring awareness. We're all aware of what the problem is, right? We have, buddies left and right suiciding. So we know what the problem is. What we're trying to do is actively create that support network that's going to keep our brothers and sisters alive.
Okay. Wow. So how did you get involved in it? Like, how did you find yourself here right now?
So I served in the Navy from 94 to 2001. I got out right before September 11th. And on September 11th, I was actually going to college. I was at Penn State. And as soon as I saw what was going on, I walked down to the recruiter to update my recall information. And they kind of laughed at me. They, back then the internet wasn't what it is today. And it was, they had no idea the severity of what was going on.
Oh, wow.
So they kind of laughed at me and said, don't worry, if we need you, we'll find you. And for the next 15 years, I sat regretting the fact that I didn't fight harder to get back in. A lot of my shipmates went over. Not everybody came back. And here I was floundering in the civilian world. And in 2016, one of my friends in Pennsylvania actually said, hey, my husband was a corpsman, which I didn't know at the time, actually. And, he's going to be going to the suicide prevention hike in Philadelphia. It was the first one in Philly. And she invited me out to stay with them and go to the hike. And I found my people. I laughed, I cried. It was better than cats. It was amazing. And the funny story is, they actually wound up getting divorced, and I speak to him, you know, a lot more often than I ever spoke to her.
Oh wow.
So he's my buddy, right? In every sense.
Yeah.
He's my support system.
Yeah.
And I've since attended 19 hikes with another 6 or 7 planned for me personally this year. And I credit IW with saving both my life and my marriage, because I was a full-blown asshole to my family. But with this emotional support and helping me be who I was trained to be and who I became, in a way that's not always accepted in the civilian world. So it gives me that outlet to be me.
Yeah.
And it's invaluable. It has absolutely saved my life.
Wow. So how do you, I've never been, unfortunately, to a hike. Every time I want to go to the New York one, it's during drill.
Well, good news. There's going to be a Jersey Shore hike this year, too.
Yes, I heard. Dan told me. I was like, let's go. So a question really would be, how do you, having been to, you said 19 at this point?
Yes.
Having been to these, like, not only being someone who works for the company, right? But how does it feel, like you said that you credit a lot of your, like, you still being here, your marriage and everything to it. But what is it doing for you that you feel that way? Like, what is it, like, what does it feel like? Is it a euphoric thing? Is it camaraderie? Is it,
yes.
Like, what's,
so, sorry,
no.
I just flat out cut you off. One of the great things about our hikes, and I know Dan and Ryan can attest to this as well, is that there are so many stories and experiences that show up at our hikes, that no matter what you've seen or done, chances are there's someone else who relates to you. So you can find someone. It doesn't matter the craziest shit you've ever thought of, right? Someone else knows exactly how you feel. Someone's done what you've done and seen what you've seen and been there.
Yeah.
And so you can relate. And, you know, there's no greater feeling than that. And, you know, not all of us have PTSD. Not all of us have experienced combat.
Yeah.
We've all, you know, felt loss. We've all felt not accepted. And this is the ultimate no judgment zone.
Yeah.
So it's just, these are my people.
I like that. These are my people. I love it. So what about you guys on the other end? I don't want to keep staring at the guy who's right next to me. So Dan, how did you find yourself involved with Irreverent Warriors? And also, like he said, you know, what has it done for you mentally, physically, emotionally? Why do you stick around? Like, how did you find yourself working with the company?
Yeah. So I lost my uncle in 2005 to suicide. Oh, wow. And, you know, when you think about, I look back on my family history and things, I really, like, my uncle, like, if it's possible to have 2 dads, he was my second dad. And it was heartbreaking, you know, and I probably didn't respond to it then the way I kind of feel about it now. But, you know, our whole family really suffered from that context. And he was the reason why I joined the Marine Corps. And it was, you know, I had been out, I wasn't out, but I was in for a bit. And I just remember he and I having like a really cool bond, you know, being Marines and be able to talk about the Marine Corps. And he was a 3-time Vietnam veteran, who we found out much later after the fact, was part of the origination of Marine Recon, right? So it wasn't a thing then. And we found pictures of him that were in not traditional military gear. Wow. And he was consistently in pictures with Viet Cong and various Vietnamese soldiers. And we started showing them to people. And I actually reached out to Black Rifle Coffee when they released one of their series coffees for the Special Forces. And I said, hey, my uncle, we don't think it was regular forces, da da da. Long story short, there were 4 or 5 individuals after I had talked to the member and it said, hey, here's what I know about my uncle. Can you help me? And they confirmed it. So there were people out there in the community that helped confirm who he was, and I was just awestruck by that fact, right? So I know that he didn't have the best experience when you talk about your traditional service in the military, right? And he did talk to me about a really bad situation where his entire platoon was taken out. So I know that, and but that's just the story, right? That shaped, and I think there's a lot of people out there that can understand that story in some sort of context. I mean, mine's a little bit different, man. Like Mark said, I never saw true combat. I wasn't a combat guy. I was an aviator in Quantico, and on 9/11, I was supposed to respond to the Pentagon at 9:30. If you guys know your time and history of what happened there, I think it was about 9:37 is when the plane struck the Pentagon. I would have been in the direct flight path of that plane, and I would have been dead. So it's really, really eerie to think about that, and that. I don't know, I mean, I'm better with it now, but of course, start to put those things together. Like, what the hell, man? Like, what? Was I supposed to be here in the first place? And based on and I get it, and trust me, I get it. There are probably several of your folks watching this, like, oh, this dude didn't see shit, and I get it. But it still isn't cool. Like when you think about like what that was, and so it eats at you, and then like I never really fit in with other social outlets, even professionally. I think I do a pretty good job professionally, but you just don't fit in. So and I think that's what IW has really given me, is just that that, like Mark said, that connection, that that true belonging, and that's what it is.
I can identify with that so much because like I got off recruiting duty a year ago. So for the past, I was on recruiting duty for 4 years. So I got off of active duty and then went back to the reserve program, and now I'm back in the civilian world, and it is so hard for me to even talk to anybody at my job, or even to find anything remotely like, or I say things that I think are hysterical and they're like, huh. And it's like, so it's like, okay, so the camaraderie's they're not there. Our comedy values aren't there, because I'm a really funny guy. But if you don't think so, there's a problem. But, so so that's a huge thing. Like, but like when I have times like this, like, even though like right now it's so sick that you're here, but like if it was just us two, I would still feel like you guys were here. I don't know if that makes sense. Yeah. Because like last week I did, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Leatherneck for Life, but they're a Marine Corps apparel company. And I ended up, they have an Instagram that I follow that has like 70,000 followers. So I ended up becoming friends together. And then he started a dart league virtually on Instagram. So last weekend, I just started playing darts, and I was here, he's in New Hampshire, the scorekeeper was in South Carolina, and we were just playing darts for 2 hours, talking about PTSD, drinking beer, and we had 700 people literally come through the live feed throughout the 2 hours. And people were talking about, like, we had a Vietnam veteran come on live with us and talk about what he was going through, talk about what he had seen, and talked about how he's a loner and how he doesn't really talk to anybody, but he caught this live feed, and now he's sitting here watching us for 2 hours just play darts and joke about the Marine Corps and talk about PTSD and some other mental, and talk about being a parent, and how do you deal with having PTSD while being a father? Like, how do you explain that to your children? So like it was just such an awesome thing. And like you said, like, these are my people. Like, finding that tribe, finding those people that you can actually be yourself around. Because let's face it, like, a lot of us, we don't have that anymore. And especially with COVID, you don't have the ability to do the things that you were doing, and that's why suicides went back to skyrocketing, and then all this stuff was happening. So first of all, thank you for just getting down to that level and explaining like, hey, this is how I feel about stuff. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you do that, other people open up and they're like, wow, I'm not the only one. Because like you said, both of you, a lot of people feel like that. A lot of people feel like, oh, well, I can't go to these things because I've never deployed or I've never seen combat or whatever. And then a lot of people feel like, oh, well, I'm lesser than, or my service doesn't mean as much because I didn't go overseas or I didn't lose anybody. So a lot of it's such a hard conversation to have for some people. So it's awesome that you guys do what you do and that this is how. So how did you find yourself getting involved with Irreverent Warriors and what and also what is Irreverent Warriors like? What has it done for you?
Yeah, sure. So I found Irreverent Warriors in 2016. So this was a year after they had established. And Tom Jorts, I always give him props because he's one of our OGs, like way back in the day. He was one of the coordinators for DC. I'm in the Washington, DC area. And I met up with him. I couldn't get to that first hike. So my first hike was technically in 2017. And my friend Tony, actually, who was the previous DC coordinator, invited me, Tony King. And he was a good friend of mine. He was a former enlisted guy in the Marine Corps, became a captain. Just said, hey, man, why don't you come out? It's a bunch of devil dogs and, vets just coming out and wearing silkies and just, having fun. I was like, that sounds great. Let's do it. But then you go on the hike and it's just an amazing journey, if you will, of just, I don't know. It's really, everybody has to experience it for themselves to understand what it really means.
Yeah.
But I think, like we said, it's really just, you feel like you fit, and you feel like you belong. And it's just really different from anything probably that most people have experienced when they go to different veteran events or things like that. Right. Cause you're right, Benny, there's always that, whatever type of event, there's always like, oh, well, I'm not this or I'm not that. Yeah. And we don't do any of that. We don't care. We care that you served in the military. And like our veteran definition, we have a veteran definition. It's a little bit different than most. But it's basically, as long as you're a veteran, we don't care. And we even include foreign service veterans in that. So we've had hikes with foreign service officers, and many. But I mean, to the second part, how has it made me different and a better person? That's still to be seen. But I agree with Mark. Like what he said is, I'm a dad. I have 2 kids. There is shit that I do not want to tell them. But I think eventually I need to. So I just, like in a sense, I just hope it makes me a better dad. That's really it, man. And a better husband, of course, right? So, I think as any marriage, you have your ups and downs and stuff like that. But it makes me care more about my time with them. So, and that's the point, right? Because we start seeing people go way too soon. Yeah. And that sucks really bad. So, I guess it just gives a perspective, as a dad and as a father, and just makes me want to be better.
Yeah.
However that is, and it's not going to be perfect, but I'll sure as hell try. So.
Yeah. Awesome. And I love that you said that because like that's a huge thing that I've been talking about lately, with the veteran community is that there's a lot of people that they're in the marriage, they're a husband, they're a father, but they're not emotionally connected to their children or their family. And like I have a friend of mine that I recently was talking to, and that conversation came up. He was like, dude, like I have a 17-year-old son, I have children, I have a wife, and he was like, I'm just not emotionally connected to them. He's like, I can get on a podcast and I can talk to you for 3 to 4 hours about anything. But he was like, if I sit next to my wife, it's like a 3-minute conversation, then we're done and I'm out the door. And I'm like, and these are even to the point where now his wife is even saying that to him, like, hey, you can go and have this full-on conversation with Marines on a podcast, but you can't have this same conversation with children or with your family. So I think that I think when I hear you talking about, being a better father, being a better husband, the same thing with you saying like, oh, the Irreverent Warriors saved my marriage, saved my life. I think that a huge part of it is that there's so many veterans that are so disconnected, and they don't understand that they're not the only one dealing with that. There's a lot of people, because let's face it, like, we're Marines, you're in the Navy, and I don't know, Ryan, what branch were you in?
He's a doc.
I was a confused sailor.
So we're taught to not feel emotion. We're taught to not, if you do, bring emotion into things, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get hit. Hey, you can't allow these things to happen. So a lot of the conversation that I've been having, especially with the infantry guys, the MARSOC, the recon guys, like the guys who are really out there, that are literally, escaping fire and all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, I was taught for years that I cannot show emotion and I can't do this. But now you want me to do that as a father, as a husband. And it's like, well, how do I do that? I don't know how to do that, and I've suppressed that part of me, and that's a huge thing that I've been beginning to talk about, because just a lot of people don't talk about it. Like, and even without being in the military, like my father's never been in the military, never stepped foot in the military, but in my whole entire life, I've never had a conversation about the things that my dad struggled with, because he was taught men don't struggle, men don't have emotion. You're gonna just F it. You're just gonna figure it the F out, and you're gonna move on. And that's like today's culture. And now, now we're having people that are getting risen up and that are growing up, and they're lacking fathers, they're lacking emotional people in their lives, and now we're seeing the dividends pay out. And it's like, okay, well, what are we going to do to be different, and how do we do that? But then at the same time, how do we, this is something that I struggle with. I have a son. It's like, okay, well, how do I explain to him how to be manly while being emotional? Like, how do you do that? And it's such a hard thing, but I'm glad to know that I'm not the only one that's like, hey, like, we got to figure out how to be better dads and better husbands.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
so, so Ryan, how did you find yourself in this beautiful organization?
I have a different path than these two guys, but just to piggyback off that, and I'll talk about it more, as I go through my story. But it's changing that perception that it's okay to not be okay, and being a strong man is knowing that when you need to ask for help and like that kind of thing, and like that, just changing that stigma of mental health and men, in particular, across everybody, but men in particular, because it is hard. I love it. But so how I got to Irreverent Warriors, I spent 6 years as an FMF corpsman. Spent my first duty station was Camp Lejeune, did a pump to Iraq, all that good stuff. And then what I like to say, they sent me where they send Greenside corpsmen to die, Norfolk, Virginia. So even just that transition from being a Greenside corpsman, which you guys know what you do for your doc, kind of thing, to go from that to now I'm just another sailor kind of thing at a Blue Side Command. It just already that lack of camaraderie, was something that I didn't experience again until I found Irreverent Warriors. But so within that, the Memphis coordinator, Nick Sawal, and I went to high school together. And, so I've known him about 15, 16 years now, give or take. And for a couple of years, he's been coordinating the Memphis hike for 3 or 4 years now. But he knew, he's like, bro, just bring one to Jax, please. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. But he was like, just please bring one to Jacksonville. And I was finding every excuse not to. And then December of 2020 at this point. So we're smack dab in the middle of COVID. I've been working from home for 8 months kind of thing. And he was like, just come to the leadership conference in Texas next month. He was like, I'll pay for your ticket. Just come, feel it out, see how it is. I'd never gone to a hike at this point. So he's like, just come feel it out. If you don't like it, no harm, no foul. Go home. Appreciate your time. But so the whole time behind the scenes, he's talking to Cindy, our CEO, saying, hey, if I could just get him there, he's a shoe-in. He was like, he will coordinate a hike, he'll be solid, kind of thing. I didn't know this, but so I show up, they hand me a name tag, says Jack's Beach coordinator, welcome to the fun. Your hike's in 10 weeks. And normally it's a 9-month process that we have built out a guideline checklist, all that kind of stuff to go through and easily manageable chunks of putting a hike together. So the first time I go to a hike was 10 weeks after I went to that leadership conference, and I'm putting together my own hike for the first time. And again, I had never experienced, the vibe from IW. So I just put together something that I would want to go to. And apparently it turned out pretty well. Had about 170 people show up. But, even just walking into the leadership conference for the first time, like there was just something palpable there that it's unspoken. There was a feeling of like Mark said, these are my people kind of thing, without knowing, well, I knew one person in the room, but other than that, I didn't know anybody else. And I, left that with probably 70 friend requests and, people that I like to think I'm, going to stick with for the rest of my life kind of thing. But so coordinated my first one, couple months went by, I get promoted to district coordinator. So now I have all of Florida. And then a couple months went by after that, put together another hike. And now I'm like Mark said, one of 9 national coordinators. So within a year, I've gone from not knowing what this organization is to now I've got 18 hikes that fall under my supervision.
Wow.
But it's one of those things that, and I tag it with almost every picture I post regarding Irreverent Warriors. If you come to a hike, you will find your tribe. Straight up. We've got people that, got to their first command and got admin set, and we've got Vietnam guys that were neck deep in shit, and everything in between. So there's somebody that you're going to connect with.
Yeah.
And again, it's unspoken. It's, if you ever need an opportunity to cry on a stranger, come to an IW hike. But and how I think how IW helps me is that, well, one, it's finding that camaraderie again, because there's, I don't know how real sailors do it, Mark, but at least in the Marine Corps community, like you are family kind of thing. And finding that again is, it just does something good to the soul. But I think giving me the outlet to be me again, and it's not that I'm not me with my family, but, there's two different things. I'm a different person when I'm with vet buddies than I am with my family. And, I'm a family man. I love my kids, love my wife, all that good stuff. But there's just, I don't know, an ability to let your hair down kind of thing. And I think that's definitely one of the reasons why our events are just for veterans, National Guard reservists, and active duty, is because when you're surrounded by people that get it, it lets you let your hair down. With, for Mark and I, that's a big deal. But
wow.
yeah, so it really does. It gives me an outlet that I can have that with those people, but still be able to be, I'm Doc in that world, but it lets me be Ryan at home.
Wow, one of the things that I caught on there, and it really hit me, was, and this is an issue that I've had when we were talking about the tribe and the meeting the people. I had so I'll be honest, I used to be the guy who, like, if you told me that you got kicked out for drugs and all this stuff, like, I was really mad, and I was like, oh, dude, don't come around here being all motivated and stuff. Like, I was really against those people. And then when I started my podcast, I had, actually, before I started my podcast years ago, I was out doing recruiting duty, and I had this person come walking up to me, and they had hair down past their all the way down past their waist, and they were like, "Hey, Sergeant Bennett, how are you? Do you remember me?" And I was like, "No, not at all." And I just kept walking away. I just walked away, and I was like, "I have no idea who you are." And then he comes back up to me, and he's like, "Dude, it's Matt." And I was like, "Not a clue." And he was like, "Matt O'Connor." He was like, "I was a Poolie when you were a Lance Corporal." Da da da. And so we ended up reconnecting. And I find out that he had gotten kicked out of the Marine Corps for alcoholism, drugs, and all this stuff. So then we never really spoke again. We just never really hit it back, whatever. So I started my podcast, and I put a Facebook post up, and I'm like, hey, if there's anybody out there who would love to be one of my first guests, just hit me up. And he's like, hey, man, I would love to. I'm a recent recovering alcoholic, and I would love to talk about my rehabilitation and what I've been through. And so I did this interview. It was one of my very first interviews, and we just started talking about, I was like, well, when did you get in, like, when were you first, around alcohol? And he was like, honestly, it was the Marine Corps. He was like, I was 18 years old, and I was handed a beer, and all of a sudden I go from this person, like, yeah, maybe in my high school years, had a couple of beers, hung out with a few friends. But now all of a sudden I'm having barracks parties and all this stuff's going on. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, I get NJP'd because one of my corporals tells me it's okay to do a line of coke and it'll be good for Monday. And he's like, I will 100% say that I effed up and I was grown enough to make a bad decision. But he's at the same time, like, he talked through it and he talked about how it affected him and how it affects him now. And he was like, bro, there's people that I should have been on a deployment with that I couldn't have been on a deployment with because I got kicked out or because I got NJP'd. And, talking about what we're talking about right now, it's like with the mental health and with suicide and all this stuff, it's like, those are things that as people, we just don't understand because we haven't gone through them. And then you again, when it comes to the lackluster, service, or you believe that you didn't do enough or stuff like this, then there's people like me. At that time, I was very judgmental. And I was like, wow, like, F this dude because he got kicked out. But I was like, okay, well, you don't know the whole story. You don't know what happened or how it happened, or you don't know the circumstances. So it's awesome that, like you said, like, that your guys is, this is it's an organization for veterans, and it doesn't matter, those things. Because it's like, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Force Recon Marine Chad Robichaux, but he has a nonprofit called Mighty Oaks. And one of the questions, and it's for rehabilitation and stuff like that. So I had reached out to him, and I was like, hey, like, what's your policy on, like, veterans? Do they need to have a DD-214? Do they need to have a, does it need to be honorable, or what's the circumstances? He was like, bro, if you were a veteran and you ever put your hand up and said, I'm going to join the Marine Corps or the military in any capacity, you can come and deal with us, and just submit your resume online. So it's just awesome that you guys are understanding that too. And it took me a lot to understand that too, because I just spent so much time, like, thinking like, oh, your service doesn't count. And I was that guy who was like, no, you're just a piece of shit. And then all of a sudden I realized, like, wait a minute, you don't know the full story. You don't know what happened, or like my buddy tells, he was like, I knew I was wrong. I was a Lance Corporal. But then I get NJP'd, and there was no room for me to fix myself. I was just told, you're a piece of shit. You're getting kicked out of the Marine Corps. And then I spent the next year of my life getting even more drunk and becoming even more depressed and more mentally, So it's like, what are we doing for those Marines? What are we doing for those sailors, those soldiers? So it's such an awesome thing to hear three of you. And I think that's the best thing that I'm getting out of this. And I'm so thankful to have three of you here, is that all three of you have a different course of how you got to the same destination. And that's the best part about it is, we have two sailors, one Marine, and it's awesome to know that what the organization has done, and that's why I wanted to have this in general, is because when people talk about nonprofits, it's like, okay, well, why do I want to donate to this nonprofit? Where's the money going to go? Where's the proceeds going to go? And then when you have three people who work for the nonprofit who are like, hey, man, the nonprofit's changed my life.
Volunteer.
We're volunteers. I was going to make that
wait a minute.
distinction.
I did not know that part.
Yeah.
We are not paid for this second full-time job.
Wow. That's even, wow, that just changed my whole entire mindset. That's even crazier. That is even more crazy. Like, that's insane. And what everyone watching who doesn't know this or listening later on, like, it all started off with Dan reaching out to me, and then he was like, hey, I have someone local that might be able to come to your house. And then the next day it was like, hey, I have a third person that could come on. So the idea that three volunteers for an organization, and you believe in it this much, that you're doing what you're doing, and you're organizing the trips, and you're organizing the hikes, and you're the ones reaching out and doing all these different things, is I can only imagine how intuitiveness and how much you have to deal with in order to get one hike locked on. Like, is that so? How does that happen? Like, how do we create hikes? How do we get more hikes throughout the United States? Like, how do we make this happen for people?
Yeah, I mean, it's all volunteers, as Mark and Ryan said. So we do have 2 paid individuals. That's our CEO and vice president, but I would more call their pay a stipend at best.
An allowance.
It's a very modest salary.
Yeah. But I mean, anybody that's interested, I mean, just go to our website, check it out. We can certainly direct you to the right place. I mean, but we would love hikes in every location. But like, we don't just give people nothing. We don't say, hey, I know Ryan's situation's a little bit different, but he had a good mentor, so I know he was backed really, really well with Nick. But we have SOPs and policies and things in place that people can come in cold and pick up. And if they really, put the time into it, and that's the thing, it's what's the value of your time, right? Like, we are volunteers and we get it, but we understand how important this is. In just the sense, like, I don't think I can see myself doing anything different,
Not a bit.
It's not, I don't know how to describe it, but it's just like, once you start doing it, you realize this is where you want to be. So
Yeah.
We call it our second job, and we tease and we're like, hey, we're going to give you a pay raise, Mark. We're going to double your salary. But we say that
to nothing.
right. But I mean, but we wouldn't have it any other way. We really wouldn't. And it's just like, because you get so much more than just pay, right? Like, pay is great, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, you get to meet people like me. You get to come to my house, unannounced,
Right.
Like, I think all of your guys' service was just enough to hang out with me on a podcast. Like, I think you guys should thank Don and then just be like, hey, thank you so much.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Just let him know, like, hey, I never thought I'd be able to meet Benny. Like, thank you so much. And I know that when you created this, Benny didn't exist, but you knew that it was going to happen.
It was all for the future. We were vision forward.
It really does change the interaction and the dynamic, though, when everybody is volunteers. We're here because we want to be, not because we have to be, kind of thing. And there's just that attitude across the organization that we are all here. It's we haven't been able to put numbers on, the lives saved, but it's definitely there. What we are doing is
Oh, no, yeah, 100%.
And that's the way that I explain it to people. I'm like, it's not something that we can define, but if you come, if you experience it, you'll know.
Yeah.
You'll know. So
okay, well, now I definitely have to experience one, especially since I'm hosting a podcast about it.
Oh, absolutely.
So I'll definitely have to do that. I'll have.
And now that I know that you only live an hour away from me, I can physically, pick you up and get you to a hike.
Hey, he will.
Within an hour of you, you have New York City, you have Philly, you have the Jersey Shore. We have, we have events going on in Baltimore, D.C., Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. Look, we have almost 90,
Wow.
different cities where that we represent.
And that's the goal too, is that it's not, we say it at the end of every hike, because we're doing, our post-hike briefs, that suicide, we cannot complete our mission one day a year. So
Amen.
The idea is that, we use these Silkies hikes as our foundation on which to build on. They get the most attention, because it's a sight to see, anywhere from, 50 hikers in maybe somewhere like Hopedale, Illinois, if you can find that. But, then you have something like Oceanside, California, where you've got 400 plus vets out there.
Dude, I'm excited that you guys told me about the Jersey Shore one, because there is Ocean County, New Jersey has the hugest population of veterans. They have like over 80,000 veterans in Ocean County, from what I understand. And I have other nonprofits that I know locally. So like, I'm excited.
But yeah, I was saying that the foundation so that you can have more events throughout the year and build that local community. Because we travel well. There, you'll have people, show up from California, Washington, Texas, the Midwest, everywhere in between. We try. Once you go to one, you'll get addicted. But you build that community based on the foundation that comes from a Silky's hike. So
that's a great point. So the cool thing about it is once you go to one hike, right? You don't want to wait a whole nother year to see those people, right? They're your people now. They're like, they mean more to you than blood.
So do you see a lot of people that go to each hike?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
So I, just me personally,
Yeah.
I go all over the Northeast. Last year was the first time I got on a plane to fly, to fly to a hike. But there are tons of people that will say, "Hey, what hike are you going to this weekend? Let's go." And they'll all get on a plane and meet up in that city.
Yeah.
Why? Because you can't wait another year to see your family.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm about to get on this. Hillary, my wife, watching the comments, like, we're going to the next one. We're gonna find out what's the closest one.
Philly's happening in June.
Okay.
Jack's Beach is in March.
I'll have our babies welcome. Children welcome.
So that's a good point. We do keep the element veteran only.
Mm-hmm.
And so civilians are more than welcome to become hike support. But this isn't really the best environment for children.
Okay.
So we do ask that you find another plan for the kids for the day.
Well, I guess you're babysitting that weekend. 2 kids and a newborn. We'll figure it out.
They can meet us at stops.
I love it. I love it.
Outstanding.
So some of the questions that I really want to talk to you guys about are just what, like, now that you guys do this, I know that, like you said, like, there's never going to be a stop to it, right? Preventing suicide's not an attainable goal. It's going to continue to happen, right? So what are some of the hopes and dreams that you guys have for it? Like, why do you continue to do it on and every day?
So something actually at our leadership conference last month, something that I mentioned was, using analogies, if you go back to the beginning of Microsoft, they wanted a PC on every desk, which, well, are there desks without PCs? Yes, but it's having that almost attainable goal that, it until that number is 0, we're going to keep going kind of thing. This started as just a reaction to, as Mark was talking about with Donnie, be like, I have to do something, to now, 6-7 years later, we have 90 hikes on the schedule, 80 whatever. And it's now, I don't know the exact numbers, but it's probably over 100,000 veterans that have been to events and that have been to IW events and have been impacted by our mission. So, like you said, until that number is 0, we're just going to keep going.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I go a little broader just from the context of, I hope that our organization really illustrates to people that suicide prevention isn't just us, right? Like we know as veterans, our best solution is ourselves, right? We've seen the challenges with the VA and other sort of public systems, with the resistance, I would say, even in active duty. And that's not a slam on the military. That's saying that's the reality of the military. They have a very poignant mission, and that is to train us very well to kill. And that's okay. That's our job, right? And I think once we get past that realization, we understand it. And Donnie says this too very much. The business of the military is the business of war. We get it. And war is hell. There are repercussions to that, right? So I think what it is that we have to recognize that, that aftermath isn't just affecting those military individuals. It's affecting families. It's affecting anybody that's in touch with that veteran. So the solution, it has to be everybody around that veteran and around that individual. So I just hope that, our movement, our message, our mission strikes other people to say, hey, I want to be involved. Okay, fine. I get it at hikes. Maybe I can't go, but I can support, or I can do other things.
Yeah.
And it's, it takes a community, right? We say that
No, yeah.
about raising kids, but I think in the general sense, it will take a community. And we use that word very distinctly too in our own organization, what community really means. And that's really what it is, right? And I think the second part is really driving a healthy culture within our veteran community.
Yeah.
And I don't mean this again in any sort of negative sense, but we're toxic as shit, man. Like we can be so bad with each other in all sorts of manners. And I mean that from all sorts of ways. And one of the things we've done too is we started the Recover Act, like our Recover mission, which is basically a sober mission within IW. It's a little subculture that whatever you're trying to abstain from, and we use booze and alcohol. Like that seems to be the popular thing, but I'm telling you, there's other things that people struggle with, and it doesn't matter. And so it's recognizing that there are people trying to fight their own battles in different ways as well, and we have different outlets for them to do that too. So it's recognizing the community at large. This is not just a singular mission for our veterans. It's everybody, everybody that is, and then driving that healthy culture. Really, I mean that's super important. To get
and it's so true that you say that with the whole community thing, because like for instance, like me, I have an older brother. He just retired from the Army after 20 years. So he joined the Army when I was 11 years old. Right after 9/11, went right to Iraq, lost one of his best friends on my birthday. And the other day I was talking to him. He just retired, and me and my brother haven't really spoken in the past like 20 years. We were never close. I was 11. He was already grown enough to join the military and move off. So we never really had a close relationship. And then all of a sudden now, he just got out of the Army, and now we're starting to talk more, and we're starting to like connect more. And the other day I was talking to him about the veterans, veteran assistance, and like I was like, oh, have you applied for a claim? Like, what are you doing? And he's like, I don't need to do that. There's nothing wrong with me. Why would I do that? I didn't suffer from anything. I don't have any issues. And immediately it became this hostile conversation. And I'm like, dude, like you watched two of your best friends die. You don't think any of that has anything to do with the things that have happened to you in the past 20 years of your lifetime? And that's why I think like when it comes to the community thing, it's like for 20 years, my whole family, we never saw him. He never talked to anybody. So like our whole family was affected. His children were affected by it, in this service. And now it's like, okay, well, if you need the help, okay, how are you getting the help? And and there's a lot of people who don't think they need help. And it's like, well, maybe you do. Maybe you do need to have, maybe you do need to go to a hike. Maybe you don't need to get, any prescription or anything like that. But
so there are two kinds of people who come to our hikes, to any of our events, whether it's a hike or an event. The first kind are those who recognize they need help. And the second kind are those who don't think they need help, but want to be there to help others. And oftentimes we realize that the two are interchangeable, right? Because when you start talking to other people and, there might be a connection that's made where someone's telling a story and it just elicits tears. It brings out emotion. And, these are emotions, as we mentioned earlier, it's in the military, it's all about F your feelings, right? In Irreverent Warriors, we say un-F your feelings. Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. To be emotional. Yeah. To recognize that you're sad, that you're upset, that you're angry. Yeah. These are all acceptable feelings, and it doesn't mean you're broken. Yeah. Right? It just means you need to be in the presence of others. Yeah. Okay. it's about, getting in that foxhole with your brother or sister. And we're not trying to drag you out of the foxhole. We're trying to make sure that you're not alone in the foxhole. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So when you're waging war in your own head, you're not alone.
Yeah.
So, those two kinds of people, even the people who go there and say, look, I'm in a good place right now. We're still prone to feeling emotion. We're still prone to feeling vulnerable, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. There are very few people within our organization who are incredibly well adjusted.
Yeah.
Right. Who are 100% handling their experiences perfectly. We all have struggles. We all have tough times. We all have down times. We all feel the quicksand on occasion. So, it really doesn't matter whether you need the help or not.
Yeah.
Right? Come out to our events, and if you don't need the help, be the help. Right? Be there for someone to share their experiences who's having the trouble.
Yeah.
Right? That's really the most amazing part of this organization. You asked the question earlier about, zero suicides is really an unattainable goal. I don't care, right? The thing that keeps me going, and I started off as a hiker in 2016.
Yeah.
Right. I joined the New York City organization, leadership team.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. My first hike was in 2016. My first New York City hike was in 2017. I joined the leadership team in New York City in 2018. I became the New York City hike leader in 2019.
Wow.
It was like crack to me.
Yeah.
But the good kind.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, you had years. That must be nice.
Right? and like every year I was like, give me more. I need more. And for me, it's not about the number that I'm saving.
Yeah.
It's because I'm not saving anyone. Right? I'm providing an atmosphere. I'm helping to provide that atmosphere. Me and my leadership team are providing that atmosphere where everybody saves everybody else. And that's what keeps me going.
Wow.
Does that make sense?
So no,
Did I explain that right, guys?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
It makes sense because like going off of what you're talking about, like that's why I started my podcast. And the feeling that you have is the feeling that I have when I don't want to do another episode, or when I have someone, I'm like, what, I feel like just rescheduling. I'm not about it tonight, and then I'm like, okay, but you've had people who've reached out to you and told you, hey man, this is helping me, and now I'm like, okay, well, if I'm helping one person, okay, well then I have to do another episode, then I have to talk about another organization, and that's why I want to have people like you guys out here, is because it just means so much to me that there's organizations that have been created to do this and do exactly what you guys are doing, and to understand that we do actually care for our community. Because like while I was on recruiting duty for 4 years, all I ever heard was, oh, veterans are toxic people, or veterans are horrible people, and or America doesn't care about our veterans. And it's like, okay, well, no, that's not true. We have people, and that's the big thing about a lot of veterans, is that they don't know what's afforded to them. So that's why I wanted to create a place where I could have people like yourselves on here to talk about the purpose of what you're doing and how you're doing it. Ryan, did you want to say something earlier? I feel like I saw you raise your hand.
No, I got my chance, but even talking about your resources, we do have people in the VFW and whatnot that at the top, the Department of Veterans Affairs that are now kind of pushing our mission as a means of unconventional therapy, basically. Because like I said, it doesn't have to be written down, but if you come, you'll feel it, somewhere.
So where so I know you had said the next one's in Philly in June, or when's the next? So how does that work? Like, is there somewhere that we can find where all the hikes are? And
IrreverentWarriors.com.
So if you go to IrreverentWarriors.com, up at the top, you can click on events, and you'll see the entire calendar of events for the year. We've only had, 3 hikes so far?
Yeah, Hawaii, so 2, actually. We got Puerto Rico coming up this weekend.
Oh, that's right. Puerto Rico's this Sunday.
Yep.
So we have something like 85 more events to go throughout the year.
Oh, wow.
So Philly is the closest one to us right now. That's why I mentioned that in June. But there are hikes, if you want to fly out to Puerto Rico this weekend,
Hillary,
get there.
get me a flight right now.
Get there.
Before the end of this episode, find me a flight.
But if you can't make it to Puerto Rico, there are tons of events throughout the year. Get on Facebook, search for Irreverent Warriors. There are groups set up in every city that we have a presence in. If you don't see a group in your area, send an email to info@irreverentwarriors.com. And we will either put you in touch with the group, or we will encourage you to start your own. And we will give you the tools, the training, and the support to get your efforts off the ground.
We're international now.
We are international.
We fancy.
We have one in Montana this year. We have one in Alaska. We have one in South Dakota. Like,
they're not international, bro.
That's totally international.
I know, but I'm saying we are international and also in obscure locations. But yeah, Normandy, France,
You're right,
London.
Yeah. We do have London. We're looking at Vancouver. We have Frankfurt, Germany coming in 23. Normandy, France is another one this year. So
you're never very far from an IW.
France and Germany.
And Guam.
I want to be an addict already.
Bring it.
So here's a question for everybody. So if you can't find yourself at a hike, or if you can't find yourself at a hike, how do you help assist in the prevention of suicide? What can you do when you talk about being a part of that community? Because that's the biggest part that matters. How can families or non-military members support? And then also, how can you just be a part of that community if you can't go to a hike?
Sure. So we have a very active social media outlet, right? So I think that's probably the best way to probably introduce folks who aren't going to hikes or just, and I totally understand that. I mean, I get it that some hikes may be a little bit too far away or whatnot. But what we will say is that, and Mark alluded to this earlier, we're not just limited to hikes. We are expanding, and we're saying events of all sorts, right? So whatever it is. But I would say first go to the social media groups. Our Facebook nomenclature is pretty straightforward. It's IW dash whatever the city is. So then, you can find kind of in general that group, or if you just Google again, IW, whatever city you're in, and then that Facebook group, you can most likely find it, or you can contact us at info. Yeah, right. That's good. That's perfect. But I mean, in general, though, too, it isn't just hikes, right? It's more any sort of event. We're actually expanding. We saw this year, we have an outdoor adventure group that has been just, it's going bonkers. And I mean, people just saying, hey, man, I'm going to go for a hike in the woods, right? I'm going to go hunting. I'm going to go fishing. I want to go archery shooting. I want to go skiing.
Riding motorcycles, whatever. If it happens outside, that's what we're putting the parameters at.
It doesn't have to be, fit in a nice, neat hike. It can be whatever you want it to be. And the groups locally in the cities too, they're definitely doing a lot of just, events. They're going playing skee ball. They're, hiking. They're just going out for picnics. They're having family events, and that's where I think too, where we don't always think like, hey, I get it. The hikes are specifically for the veteran, but there are a lot of groups out there too. And the cities are saying, hey, no, this is a full family event. Bring them out, right? We're having Friendsgivings. We're having all sorts of things. I mean, you name it. I think it's probably happened from a local context, and it's really what you as the individual to want to do. So if you join the groups and you say, hey, I'd like to do this, most people are like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, I think it's kind of what you make it too, right? So
So another thing with you, so a lot of this, I know you had said that a lot of this helps you with your own life, mentally, physically, emotionally. So what are, besides the hikes, what are some other things that you guys do for mental toughness and stuff like that? Like, I know that you had said before, talking about being a better father, being a better husband. Like, what are some things that, because like I said before, it's a huge topic that I've been trying to discuss with a lot of people, and especially now that I have 3 veterans, with me, is how do you, correlate what you're going through as a father and or a husband, and explain that to other people so they understand. And now, mind you, I'm not saying like those people out there who are like, hey, I'm a veteran, it's okay that I go crazy and have roid rage and have PTSD. Like, I'm not saying that. How do we explain to people what we're going through, how we're feeling, so that they understand what's happening, if that makes sense?
Go ahead, Mark. I think you were going to start there. So,
well, that's a good question. I guess the short answer is I don't have to explain it to anybody because I have this outlet. I don't, look, I still say I still eat my meals in 15 minutes or less. And when I do, I eat, I turn the plate like I would the tray, I still have all of these quirks, but I don't have to explain it to anybody because what does it matter?
Yeah.
Right? I have quirks. Deal with it. Yeah. It's okay. With my family, what's actually helped me is to talk to my family about what I do with IW and not really make it about myself, but about the mission in the organization, to the point where my wife is going to be volunteering this year, is going to be hike support this year, which is an amazing thing, right? She's seen the benefit and the value of me participating in this organization without even seeing me in the element, right? So she recognizes the benefit, and she's looking finally after 6 years. She's going to actively support me now instead of passively support me, which is an amazing thing. But when I'm, when I'm with, when I'm at work, I have quirks. That's okay. I don't need to explain it to you. Because I can exist knowing that I'll have my outlet, right? And thankfully, I've made IW such a part of my life. Because when I'm done with my work, I go to my other job, as Dan mentioned, and I do IW things. Yeah. So, I get that fix every day because I'm talking with other leaders, and I'm talking with prospective hikers, and I'm talking with sponsors and donors, and I've made I've made my community how do I say this? I've almost molded IW around my life so that I can exist in my life, and then and it's okay because I have IW around it.
Wow.
So that's me personally.
Yeah.
And that's really helped me.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Because every night I know I can go down to my office in my basement and do things for IW.
And play Dungeons and Dragons or whatever else he does.
Well, I do that too. I set up a Irreverent Warriors Dungeons and Dragons during the pandemic. And you know what? Awesome. It was amazing. It was so cool to.
I was joking.
No, it's for real, yo.
He's dead serious.
So during the pandemic, there was, especially in this area, it was so isolated.
Oh yeah.
Right. And I said, look, I needed to communicate with people, and it was a great way to do it for 2, 3, 4 hours at a time. Yeah. Right. Where you can just have fun doing something. Yeah. Right. And it just happened to be rolling dice and telling a story, and it was really cool. And it was a great way for us to not feel so isolated, because in the very beginning, so in 2020, when New York City first shut down, we were supposed to have our hike on D-Day, and by April we knew that wasn't going to happen, right? And so we're like, all right, great, our veterans aren't going to get together, so what are we going to do?
Yeah.
And we basically said, no, this can't stand. So we rescheduled it for later in the year. And we said, we're going to do what we have to do in order to get veterans together. Right. And we're going to, when we're in motion, we're going to be 6 feet apart. Great. And when we're stopped, we're going to put on masks. Fine. Whatever. We're going to be outdoors. We're going to do what we have to do, but we cannot stay isolated.
Yeah.
So I've made it a point to surround my life with Irreverent Warriors so that I'm not isolated anymore.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, Benny, if I can add there, what Mark's talking about is purpose. I think in the end, if you want to put one word to this, it's purpose. Amen. Like I hear Mark talking about all those amazing things, and trust me, I can side with him because he knows I had to switch DC to Manassas on the whim because we had the same challenges. But what it is, and I think what people find overall with this organization is purpose. Amen. And I mean literally the purpose to live as well.
Yeah.
And I'll tell this real quick. The boys know it, but we have our social media coordinator, Lewis, who had a death day scheduled. It was scheduled. He knew when he was going to commit suicide. He was preparing himself. He had moved. He had facilitated finances. He was preparing to kill himself, and he didn't because he came to a hike. And I say that story very legitimately because it's so powerful when you hear that. And I'm telling you, the man is amazing. I love that guy so much. It just, and it's just like the thought of losing that guy like hurts me deep, Yeah. So, but it's purpose. It's, everything Mark explained was purpose.
No, yeah. and you're so right, because it's like I just, like for myself, like I got off of active duty and I didn't know what I was gonna do. Like I had no idea. I was like, okay, I can go back to my normal job. I can be a mailman again. And like I went from being a recruiter for 4 years, and I was like, but I'm gonna go back to doing like a minuscule job to where I give someone their mail and then that's it. And I was like, yeah, I get it. Like, I changed someone's life because, like, their bill's not late. Like, whatever. Like, I got their Amazon package on time, like, they're not mad about it. But in my mind, I was just like, it's not the same. It's not what I've been doing. It's not that the purpose was gone. And then my wife was like, hey, you should start a podcast. And I was like, what am I going to talk about? She was like, dude, you don't ever stop talking. So just start a podcast. And now, here I am. And that's exactly what it is like the purpose. And that's what a lot of people, a lot of people are so quick to get out. And then they realize once they get out, they're like, okay, well, what do I do now? Because for that time that you were in, you had a purpose. You had a job that needed to get done. You had to be at formation at this time. You had to do this. You had to do that. So every single day for however many years you were in, like you had a purpose every day. Even like when, like my wife, as soon as I came home from Afghanistan, me and my wife were newly engaged. And as soon as I got home, I was like, hey, I'll go back right now. And now that you think about it, you talk about it, it's like, okay, well, why? Because when I was there, I had purpose. I had a schedule. I had to do this at this time and all these things. And then you come back to the civilian world, and it's not the same. It's like, okay, well, if I wasn't here tomorrow, you would find somebody else to do it. And now it's just a different world that and especially when you're transitioning out. And that's the huge thing about it when you're getting that transition out is they don't talk to you about that. Like nobody says, hey man, you're going to get out of the Marine Corps or the Navy or the Army and you're going to feel like you're useless and you have no purpose. Like that's not in the slideshow. Like that part of it is not there. They don't tell you that part. They're not like, hey man, one day you're going to sit there having a beer and all of a sudden realize like, wow, I feel useless right now.
Right.
And that's the thing
I feel that in my core.
Yeah.
Like I know exactly what you're describing.
And and that's what a lot of people deal with, and that's why you have these suicide rates, because people they're not prepared for that. They're not prepared for the fact that, and it's even the guys who did 20 years who retired, and those guys who did, they were the pinnacle, they were the top, and now all of a sudden nobody cares that, hey, you were a sergeant major or a master gunnery sergeant. They don't know what that means, and now for the first time ever, you're back to being a normal human being, and you feel like, wow, what's my purpose? Why am I here? And that's Brian. They do a horrible job of explaining to you what you're getting out.
Yeah.
Brian in the comments.
So thank you for your service.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, Brian in the comments. He's, the Lexington coordinator. He's a retired master sergeant, drill instructor. He's did the deal, and this is where he's found his people. Came to my hike last year. That was the first one. Now he's coordinating one. Mm-hmm. So just to show you how quickly, and I don't want to use the word addicted because, there's a negative connotation to that, but immediately you're like, I need more of this, because this is what I was missing. So,
yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but it just fit with what you were talking about.
Yeah.
No, but and that's the big, and I'm glad that this ended up here, but it's because a lot of people I've heard that a lot is I'm lost. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And even myself, right now, I work at a college, don't really enjoy the job. I have this podcast, but it's okay, well, I feel like I'm worth more than that. I feel like there's something else that I'm meant to do. Well, what is that? And it's you feel like I lost this purpose. 3 months to learn the basics, 4 days to transition out.
Yeah, true.
As my man, Anthony,
he's right.
Thank you. But it's the truth, and they, for me, when I transitioned out, I was on recruiting duty, and mine, because of COVID, was virtually. Mm-hmm. So they literally emailed me a PowerPoint and were like, hey, read through this PowerPoint and you're done. And I was just like, and I'm a reservist who's already been a civilian before. So I've already been accustomed to being in the civilian world.
But that was even more than I got when I was out. My enlistment was up. I went into the XO. We had a 5-minute conversation. And he gave me one bit of advice, and I still remember it to this day. My whole, every bit of advice that I got when transitioning out was the one sentence that my XO gave me. He said, obstacles are things that people see when they take their eyes off their goals. And that was all I got to transition out. I had no idea. I was a bosun's mate in the Navy. I was on a Marine limousine. I was a bosun's mate. And we're deckhands. We tie knots and steer the ship and all that. What the hell am I going to do when I got out? What does that translate to? Yeah, I probably could have gone, and worked in a harbor or something. I wound up working in a warehouse, but I felt like I was already a part of something bigger, and now I'm working in a warehouse. I'm picking pencils in an office supply warehouse to ship out. My purpose was completely gone.
Yeah.
All right. Then I tried to go to college, but then September 11th happened, and I'm like, no, I can't. So, I went to try and figure out another career that made me feel the same purpose that the military made me feel, and I didn't realize it while I was in, but I had a purpose, right? I didn't think of it in those terms. Yeah. But now that I'm out, I missed that.
Yeah.
And I missed it for 15 years.
Yeah.
And
so if you don't mind me asking, how was that 15 years before Irreverent?
Do you know how many times I wrapped my car around a tree in my head? I can't tell you how many times I contemplated it. Mm-hmm. And there are some people who will say it was strength that I didn't, or weakness, or failure to commit, or whatever. I don't see it as any of that. I just see that I was treading water, and sometimes I wasn't able, sometimes I started gulping water, right? But for the most part, I just treaded water until I found purpose again. And I can't tell you why I didn't wrap my car around a tree. I can't tell you why I didn't, end it for myself.
Yeah.
But I didn't.
Yeah.
So, I try not to think about that too much. I'm just thankful that I didn't, because it's brought me to where I am today.
Dude, it's I'm thankful that you didn't, because you're here to have this conversation.
And thank you. I appreciate that. But it's even stronger than that, because IW has helped me recognize the potential within myself to the point where I'm now trying to better my personal life to match my IW life. Right. So I'm now, I work in IT, and I'm going back and getting certifications so that I can elevate my work to match the kind of work that I do with IW. So it's challenged me, and for many, and I think Dan and Ryan, I think you guys might be able to back me up on this. Oftentimes, Irreverent Warriors has a way of recognizing potential in people who don't recognize it in themselves. And when that happens, we have two choices. We can either rise up the rest of our life to match Irreverent Warriors, or we can say, I'm scared by what IW sees in me, and I'm gonna drop it and stay in my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I'm blessed that I'm part of an organization that can recognize that talent and amazing quality within so many people, that we challenge each other to rise up.
I'm a perfect example of that.
What's that?
I said I'm a perfect example of that. And every time I have the promotion, talk with Cindy, it's thank you for believing in me, because I sure don't. But it's one of those things that it just you find the passion in this organization, because it is worth it. My wife will tell you I have a second job because it might as well be, but it is so worth it for the impact it has on me personally. It's it's an incredible organization.
So what I've gotten out of all this is two words: passion and purpose. That's what I've gotten out of all of this, is that at some point or another we've all lost a sense of purpose, didn't know where to go, didn't know how to find it. You three found it in Irreverent Warriors. I found it in my podcast and in my family, as well as you guys have with your families. And then the passion to persevere through all of it, because at the end of the day, like you said, you didn't know why you stayed here every day, but now here you are. You've reached this destination where you can help other people with their mental toughness, and you can help them with their suicide ideations, and you can tell them the same stories. And that's my favorite part of all of this, is being able to say, hey man, I've been there. And and also at the same time, it's okay, well, hey, maybe, and this is something that I've realized too, is okay, well, maybe I haven't been in your specific shoes, because no one can be. I'm not you. I don't have your mental capacity, but I've felt this in my own life in this capacity. And now we can talk about that and let you know, like you guys are saying with, talking about these hikes, like talking about stories and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden your emotion comes out of nowhere. And, and that's what it is that a lot of people just don't understand that. Like I have an older uncle who he doesn't speak about his service in the Army at all. He will not talk about it. He's severe alcoholic, or severely dependent upon either marijuana or alcohol, one of the two, and you don't know anything about his service. He just doesn't talk about it. And that's the thing, is that like, okay, well, how do we get you to talk about it, or how do we get you to feel like okay, you don't want to talk about it, come to this hike. And now you hear other people talking about it, and now you want to realize, okay, wow, it's not just me. Okay, there are other people going through this stuff. Like that's and I'm so glad like, I'm so glad that you guys came out tonight to talk about this, because I've heard of Irreverent Warriors for years, but I've never known what it is to this capacity. And being able to speak to three people about it and what it's done in your life and how it saved you, it just, now I feel like I've been an advocate for it. Like I feel
Just
like
wait.
being a part of this
Just wait.
conversation, I already feel like I've gone on 20 hikes. Not to discredit your 19 hikes.
Don't worry, I'll have you covered.
But I mean, it's summed up simply. It's on all of our branding. Bring veterans together. It's on my polo.
Yeah.
It's on Mark's polo. It's on
Yeah,
Dan's
yeah,
polo.
yeah.
Those three words. It's, you could be walking in an airport and see a guy wearing a Marine Corps hat, and you just give that like knowing nod, and you're right there, kind of thing. It's that expounded, that you don't have to talk about what you did or what you didn't do or any of that, but just knowing when you have two veterans together, there is some kind of connection there that's palpable, that you just feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, Benny, to your point, man, like we encourage all sorts of partners, however you want to call it, right? Because that's, in the end, like, again, that goes back to that community concept. We're here, and we know it's going to take an entire community. So it's not us versus everybody else. It's us and everybody else.
Yeah.
And we know that, and that's maybe that's a little bit different of a thought pattern. But I'm saying we know that, and we need folks. I mean, you're a perfect outlet for folks to hear it, and I mean, we just appreciate it. We appreciate you having us on, and but just having a conversation. I mean, that's more important thing. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you. The next one's got to be all four of us in person. That's the next
Yeah.
one. We'll figure that one
Sure.
out. Maybe we'll do a hike, and then right after the hike, we'll do a podcast episode. Like,
I just
we all
don't do
hate our
up north
lives.
during the winter. Y'all can
Jersey Shore, my man. So.
But all right. Well, hey, I think there's no better way to end it. Does anybody have anything they want to share with us before we end this? You have anything more on your heart, or anything? And also, where do we find you? I know we said the IW / whatever city, but where do we find you on Instagram, Facebook? How do people become a part of Irreverent Warriors?
Yeah, so our webpage is probably the easiest. It's just www.irreverentwarriors.com. And then I think if you go to Facebook, Instagram, probably would be best to go to our flow page. We have a flow page. So if you just go flow page / Irreverent Warriors, we have all sorts of social media outlets, and including, what's the gaming platform, guys? I always forget
Discord.
that. Discord. We got all sorts of stuff too. So.
Oh wow! And apparently, you guys play Dungeons and Dragons as well.
Yeah,
Look, gaming takes all shapes and forms, right?
But yeah.
All right.
Roll
All
for
right.
initiative.
All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for coming out. I really appreciate it. And everybody who's listening, make sure you'll follow them on all social media platforms. Find your closest hike, sign up for it, reach out to them to become a partner and/or become somebody a part of the team. And let's just do this together, because it is a community of people that's gonna fight this. All right. Well, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks for having us, Benny.
Thanks, Benny.
Thank you.